Okay guys, this is going to be Unit 1, Lesson 1, Landscapes. I am re-recording it due to the excellent sound quality of the last one. So if you weren't able to do it, you can follow along with this one. Make sure to double check the PDF in the portal for what I'm asking for in the screen caps that you're going to be turning in. So you should already have Unreal open. We are going to begin by going into Lights. We're going to go ahead and grab a directional light so we're able to see our landscape as we make it. In our Modes tab right over here, we have Landscape. You can also use Shift 3 to get to it. So the first time you click on it, it's going to prompt you to make a landscape. For the sake of not taxing your computer too much, we're going to go ahead and dial down a couple of the settings here. So for section size, let's do maybe 31 by 31. Sections per component, let's do 2 by 2, and number of components, let's do 4 by 4, which will be a fairly small landscape. Once you put in these settings, and you can also change location, rotation, and scale, of course, go ahead and hit Create, and you will see a landscape populate here. Next, it'll automatically move you over to the Sculpt tab. The Sculpt works the same way as Mudbox does for sculpting, and you'll also notice that as we move around on the landscape and apply textures, that you see it broken down into components. Landscapes are calculated in a different manner than regular geometry. They have an automatic mapping for the textures and automatic LOD states that allow you to calculate a much higher, larger terrain at the same time, without taxing your consoles or systems. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start with Sculpt. The very first tool is the Sculpt tool. If I hold Control, I'm going to apply the sculpt onto my landscape here, so let's go ahead, zoom out a little bit, and maybe get a slightly better angle. Something like that. And I've got brush size, fall off, and tool strength, all should be fairly familiar, and I'm going to go ahead and just start applying stuff. So as you can see, you can build up a mountain range or other type of landscape very quickly this way. You can also bring in a height map, black and white scale map, and it will automatically generate a landscape for you based on those height settings. So it works kind of like a bump map or normal map where different shades of black and white equate to different heights. So it doesn't really matter, it doesn't need to be beautiful, clearly. Okay, let's take a quick peek at some of the other tools. So we have Smooth. Smooth is just going to kind of round everything out. Similar to Mudbox, it's going to sort of bring it back to how it guesstimates the surface already looked. Flatten is going to go ahead and flatten areas on the top. If you wanted to have like a flat area for someone to run around on, that works pretty effectively. We're going to go back to ramp in a minute. Erosion, there's a few different erosion algorithms. It just generates a little bit of visual interest. In this case, it's kind of flattening it out a little bit. Same thing, hydro erosion, noise. Retop, we're not going to actually use for this one. For ramp, and you need to include a ramp in your screen cap, you merely pick a location, hold Control and drag, and you can create a ramp. When you've picked an area you like, until you're committed to it, you can still move it around. Hit Enter, and it will generate a height-specific ramp for you. Next, we're going to use the Hole tool, but we need to make a material that has hole as an ability first. So making the materials for the landscapes are not at all intuitive. I've gone ahead, I put in some custom materials. They're not real exciting, just CG textures thrown through a normal map generator, but just to give you an idea. So we're going to click on Materials up here. We're going to go New, Material. Whatever folder is selected when you create it is the one it'll default to. I'm just going to call it Awesome Material, because I'm awesome. Double click on it to open the material generator. Now this is going to look a little bit like the Hypershade, but it's a lot more complicated. If you remember, say, the snow textures and things like that, it's a little closer to that. So I'm going to move this to the side. I want to be able to see my awesome textures here. And I'm going to go ahead and start pulling in everything I want. So let's tuck that a little bit further. We don't need to worry about that many right now. I'm going to pick, you'll notice I have each item with its normal map pair here. I didn't bother to make any specular or anything fancy for this. So I'm going to pick grass foliage, and while I'm here, just for convenience, I'm going to go ahead and put this, we'll kind of make some rows for the moment. Dead grass. You can do just 3 of these, that's fine, that was the default tutorial. Keep going, double check to make sure I'm putting the correct normal map with it. I want it in this order. And we'll ignore the last one. Okay, I'm going to put these off to the side for a moment, but I want to keep them in the same order. It'll just make my life a tiny bit easier. Then I'm going to go over here to Awesome Material, and I'm going to change blend mode from opaque to masked. Now, anytime you want any sort of alpha channel options in here, you're going to want to have to change this. By default, Unreal will always have everything under opaque. So if you have an embedded alpha channel and you bring it in, it will come in as opaque. So we'll go from opaque to masked. Notice, watch the Awesome Material node there when I click on it. Ta-da! Opacity mask is now lit up. Next I'm going to right click, and you can either type in the search box, which is really helpful because, as I said, a lot of the nodes you're going to use are not going to be intuitively located, or we can go through and open them up if we know where they are. So everything we're going to be doing is in the landscape section. I'm going to click down here, landscape, and I know I need a layer blend, which is going to go here. Then I know I need a layer landscape visibility mask, which is how we're going to use the whole material. We'll put that down here. And then lastly, I want at a landscape layer coordinates. And this one goes over here. So we'll go ahead, I'll plug in visibility mask into opacity, kind of scoot it off to the side there for a moment. Now when I click on the layer blend, you'll notice that it doesn't have anything to blend yet, it has 0 elements. So just like in computer programming, we're starting with 0 for everything for our count. So I'm going to go 1, 2, how many did I put in? 5, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to name them as I go, so I'm just going to call that Clover because I don't remember what it is. Then I'm going to change it from weight blend to height blend. Now again, watch the blend node when I put it in. Now I've got layer clover and height clover. And you don't need to do this. This is just to kind of facilitate the preview working properly. Under preview, I'm going to put 0.1. Next one, I don't know what that is. Let's call it crappy grass. Weight blend to height blend. I'm going to call this 0.2. Scroll down, next one, that would be dead grass. Weight blend to height blend, 0.3. Next one, sparse grass. Weight blend to height blend, 0.4. Last one is frozen grass. Weight blend to height blend, 0.5. Okay. Now let's look at our material nodes for a second. We need to plug things in. This is going to be our UV coordinate system. So from our landscape coordinates, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm left clicking and dragging. I'm waiting for the little check mark to appear, and I'm plugging in my coordinate out node to my UV in node. That one didn't take. Okay. There we go. Now I put them in the specific order to make my life a tiny bit easier. These are right here, stand for the different channels. This is going to be RGB. Then we have R, G, and B separate, of course. And the last one is your embedded alpha channel. Now remember, in Photoshop we usually use our alpha channel for transparency, but we can also use it for things like specularity, gloss, blah, blah, blah. Zoom in a little bit here. So we're going to go ahead and take our complete channel set here, put it into layer. Then we're going to grab our alpha channel, I'm going to put it into height. Just plugging in. If you plug it in the wrong place, so let's go say I put it there, you can hold down Alt, and if you click on it, Of course not for my tutorial, right? There we go. If you click on it, it'll break it back off. So let's see, we want to go from here. Do I have that right? We're missing something. Okay. So we've got layer dead grass, but we're missing a height for this one. So I'm going to click on layer blend. And we're going to go back to dead grass, and I've put it height blend. So there we go. That looks a little better. Layer. Height. Layer. Height. So much excitement. Okay. Then I'm going to take this layer blend, and this gets plugged into the base color, which is basically your diffuse map. As you can see, our preview isn't super exciting, but it's a combination. So I have normal maps for all of these. To make my life a little bit easier, I have them in the exact same order. I'm just going to go ahead, I'll pick them up, put them over here for a second. I'm going to control click on landscape coordinates. I'm also going to change the scale a little bit. So landscape coordinates, let's do the scale completely arbitrarily. You'll need to fine tune it to what you're actually doing. But I'm just going to hit 10. Why not? Oh, that looks awful. That's why not. 5. We'll see how it looks on our landscape. Okay, landscape coordinates, hold control, layer blend. Now, again, counterintuitive, control W stands for duplicate. So now I have another landscape coordinate and another layer blend with the exact same settings as the first ones. And we are going to plug everything in just like we did with the diffuse maps, but on our normal maps. So I know, super exciting. Here we go. Order doesn't matter for clicking it up here. I'm just trying to be organized. You'll also notice these got bigger because I have these settings here at a higher scale than I did before. Okay, and as you guys should be familiar with, this is a normal map, so where do you think we're going to plug it in? Yes, on the normal setting there. Okay, we're almost done here. We have our set of 5 landscape textures in diffuse. We have a set of 5 landscape textures in normal mapping. The last thing we need, it's not very evident on this one isn't so bad, but if you'd like to get rid of the shine or control the shine, I'm actually not going to use specular for this one. I'm going to right click and I'm going to pick constant, which is just kind of a variable. I'm going to grab constant, pop it over here, and I'm going to put this one into roughness. And we'll give it something like 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, so I'll do 0.7. If you want, just for learning experience, you know, you can feel free to disconnect things and try plugging in the wrong thing. Just make sure eventually you put it back. So here would be our landscape if it was metallic. You can see a little bit of normal mapping coming through there. You can, let's see, emissive. Come on. There we go. And this will generate light. For the moment, we're just going to go ahead and put this into roughness. Now, once you're done with any sort of creation process in Unreal, you have to kind of check out the item that you've made. So we're going to hit apply and we're going to hit save. We're going to wait a second. Sometimes Unreal will take a little while to compile things. We'll close that for the moment. Here's our beautiful landscape once again. I'm going to click up here in our scene outliner. I'm going to click on landscape. I'm going to wait apparently a rather large moment here. There we go. I am going to go into materials. I'm going to find my brand new awesome material. Looks like crap. And see these little arrows here right next to any sort of node? This will add in whatever is selected in the content browser. So the content browser is where you have everything. It's a little counterintuitive, but you're going to select what you want, and then you're going to click this little arrow here. Now, because we went ahead and did the opacity mask part of it, we're also going to use it for a landscape hole material. Unreal actually suggests not using the same one because it adds a lot more memory usage, but for the sake of this tutorial and for the smaller size of your games, if you're going to use a hole material, you can go ahead and put it here. We're going to wait for it to compile. This can take a long time. Let's pop back to Sculpt for a minute. I'm going to click on my Sculpt tools, and I'm going to pick Visibility. I'm also going to make this a lot smaller because it usually comes out a little bit undesirably big. I'm going to find some place I'd like to put a hole. Now, the way the hole works in a landscape, it works as a boolean. It's just saying this area that you've colored is no longer active. So we won't be able to see it, but if we look through it and we just leave it as a hole in the landscape, we'll be able to see the back side of the other geometry, which, as you might recall from all your Maya, the back side doesn't exist to the game engine. So in most circumstances, you would make this little hole in the landscape. The geometry is still there, it just counts as inactive, and you would take a model of a cave and kind of wedge it behind. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm holding Control. I'm just going to go ahead and make a little hole there. It's probably not going to show up immediately. We're still compiling shaders, as you can see in the bottom, but I'm not patient, so we're not going to wait for it. Next, I'm going to go over to the paint. Now, this seems a little counterintuitive. We just spent all this time making this fancy material. Now we're actually going to use it, and we have an extra step we have to put in. So I'm going to make sure my material folder here is clicked. I'm going to go through all 5. So here's our layers: clover, crappy grass, dead grass, sparse grass, and frozen grass. I'm going to click on the arrow, create layer info. I'm going to pick weight blended layer, and I'm going to pop that in the material folder. So, okay. Do that for all of them. You'll notice the note appearing at the bottom. Okay, still compiling. And now when I click on each of these, so I'm going to click on Clover, and I'm going to make my tool a little bit stronger. Looks fine, good enough. And now if I hold Control, I will paint the texture on. Now right now it's again, it's still compiling, it's going to look big and sloppy, and we'll still probably have some artifacts afterwards, but we can start painting and cleaning up as we go. So I will lower my brush size. I will keep the strength about there. And let's use some crappy grass now. And I will paint. Again, don't worry about that quite yet. When that finishes compiling, this will actually look correct. It will be ugly, but it will be correct. Okay. And then we'll throw on, let's see, sparse grass. There's a method to my madness. I'm actually doing something here, I promise. And frozen grass, we're going to kind of pop on the top of these. So the more I'm adding on, you also notice my compiling count is going up. So I'm going to go ahead, I will pause the recording for a moment and let that play catch up. Okay, so here we are again. Now you can see my shaders have been compiled. I'm still missing a couple gaps. I can just go ahead and paint those in so they don't drive everyone nuts. But you'll see that I have, at least an attempt, the grass is kind of on the, or the frozen grass is on the flatter parts, and it gets into deader and deader grass as we go down. You'll also see the hole that we made using the visibility now. Now again, I repeat, you're supposed to put geometry behind it. For this tutorial, we're not going to. just to give you guys an idea of how to use Unreal if for your team game you are going to be putting in any sort of cave or little indentation like that. Again, you'll have to model something in Maya and bring it in as an asset. So I'm going to go back to paint up here. I'm going to go to the top, look through my paint tools. You'll notice smooth, flatten, noise. They work kind of as expected, but you have to think about the same interpretations that we use for sculpting in a painting process. So I'm going to pick smooth. I'm going to kind of fuzz it about a little bit, and I'll get a transition between my materials that makes a little more sense. So it's not as abrupt. Keep in mind you can also change your fall off of your brush too. If you want kind of a fluffier brush, you're going to use higher fall off. If you want a harder brush, you're going to use a lower number of fall off. The numerical value between 0 and 1 stands for the percentage of the brush that is considered fall off. So just kind of go through here, fluff it up a little bit. Definitely one of the uglier landscapes I've made in my time. Ta-da! Okay. So let's take this a couple steps further. We're going to add in a couple extra accoutrements here. So we're going to go into, let's throw in a player start. So let's go back to our geometry mode. We have basic and pop a player start here. Let me remind you, when you add a player start, don't make it lower than the landscape because you'll just fall for infinity. I'm going to put it a little higher than landscape. That looks good. Let's also get a little fancier here. I'm going to, again, I have a search bar here if I don't feel like looking. I'm going to go ahead and do skybox. Grab the BP sky sphere. Just kind of throw on some instant ones. So the sky sphere and water are the two things you're allowed to use that's built into Unreal for your game. We can also go through, we've got things like sun brightness, cloud speed. You can see them going by. Cloud opacity, let's bump them up a little bit. Star brightness, da-da-da. So feel free to play around with these and see what you like. Again, optional, makes your landscape a little prettier. You can see the back of the normals here, so I can see right through my landscape, which is fantastic. Now let's play with foliage. So I have one of the models that you're going to import on one of a few lessons from now already built in here. So I'm going to go to foliage. Click here. Now I'm going to go into, I think I put in props, and you'll notice here I have something called cabbage. It's very tiny. I'm going to pick it up. You can pick whatever you want. There is also some bushes, chairs, whatever you want to grow in your landscape. Now remember, this is a glitch and it's really annoying. It looks like you're supposed to drag and drop it here. You actually have to drag and drop it all the way onto this bar that says drag static messages from the content browser onto this area. It's a known glitch. Hopefully it'll eventually get changed. So if I do it correctly, a whole bunch of settings will appear here. Align to normal means that if I paint my shrubs or cabbages or whatnot on a landscape, it'll actually be angled based on it. I can also change the max angle and the Z offset. I might not, for example, want stuff growing out of the sides of mountains, only on a flat horizontal surface. So I know this model is very small, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do minimum, let's say 5. I don't know what it'll let me do here. Okay, so it'll let me do 100. It'll be funny, hopefully. For Z offset, I'm going to do minimum 0, let's say maximum. We're just going to ramp things up. Ground slope 45 degrees, so again, there's a point where it won't stick the models to the sides if it's at too much of an angle. We have collision options. You don't want to be necessarily running that much collision. As you know, usually in games you can just kind of walk through the grass. We could make it dynamic, but we're not going to because we only have a few months to make our games. So once I have everything here and I feel pretty good about it, I'm just going to hold control just like I did with the sculpt, just like I did with the paint, and I can start sprinkling cabbages everywhere. Oh my goodness. Did we lose our texture? There it is. They grow right before your eyes. Okay. So you'll notice they're not really sticking to the sides. I've got a few of them there. There's a few floating in space. I can just hold control and add as much as I want. Now again, keep in mind the limitations of your computer. Before you get overdone with this, I know you're calculating an absolute ton of geometry, and for example, this cabbage does have a little more geometry than totally necessary. Okay, So there's my world so far. When you are ready, when you're done, go ahead and hit save, of course, and you want to build. Now every single time you put something in Unreal, you're eventually going to want to build it to make it permanent. You can build lighting and geometry calculations separately. If you want to build both at the same time, you just hit the build button. If you'd like to do one or the other, you can go build geometry, build lighting only. So I'll do this. Hopefully it won't take too long. It's not a very great or complicated level, but again, there's a lot of cabbage. I'll do you a kindness and go ahead and... Oh, I was going to stop recording. Let's see. I'll stop recording and come back in a second. Okay, there we go. There's our fantastic level. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to hit play. It's going to be a first-person shooter. I'm borrowing Paul Morse's fairly awesome headphones so you can actually hear me, and I'm sure this will be way too loud. Way too loud. So you can see the Z offset from my world of cabbages here. And now I can run up my ramp. Cabbage shadows everywhere. Here's the hole. Again, I don't have a geometry there so we can see the sunset through it, and because it is a disabled area here, I can also fall forever and ever. Okay, I'll go ahead and hit escape to stop. You can see all my cabbages way up there. And now you guys need to go and double check the PDF, see what kind of screenshot I need, label it correctly based on last name, first name, put it in my Dropbox, and you're good for the first lesson.